Today we're going to talk about maintaining appropriate behavior. Most teachers would probably tell you that one of the most frustrating moments as a teacher is when you can't handle the behavior of your classroom. And so, as a teacher and as an effective teacher, you have to take steps, you have to consider procedures, you have to consider your management skills in order to be able to have um, that positive environment that we talked about in Chapter 8, having that learning environment that's positive for your students. And one of the best ways of doing that is understanding how to maintain appropriate behavior. I think a question you have to ask yourself is, what does your classroom look like? The question that we're answering this week is, what is a positive learning environment? You gave an idea of what you wanted. Now the question becomes, does your classroom look like that? If not, what are the reasons? Sometimes it may have something to do with the behavior of your students. So we're going to take a look at some of the different issues as it relates to maintaining appropriate behavior. Um, if we look at a definition of appropriate behavior, notice what the first bullet point says: student behavior that is consistent with the educational goals of a specific educational setting. So in other words, you want learning to occur, and many times if learning is occurring, you're going to have appropriate behavior in your classroom. And then the second bullet point says appropriate behavior is not the mere absence of inappropriate behavior. So you may have students that are not causing problems, or from a behavior standpoint are fine, but maybe they're not doing anything. Maybe they're just sitting there, being restless, being idle, and not participating in the class. So we want also to remember that appropriate behavior is being proactive and moving towards the learning that you want to occur. So we want to focus on 4 categories of disruptive behavior. And if you've been in my Pete 3800 class, these are 4 categories that you may be familiar with, and 4 categories that we have talked about before. But when we look at the chart, you'll notice that there's some examples of each of these categories. Now, when we think about non-problems, for some teachers, they would consider this to be a major problem. And many times they take way too much time to deal with what we consider to be non-problems. So the question becomes, how do you handle non-problems? If it takes a lot of your time and it's distracting you from doing your job, you may want to consider strategies to be able to handle non-problems more effectively. Number 2, minor problems. The question is, when do minor problems become major problems? Now look at these examples: excessive talking during group work, running to get equipment after being asked to walk, excessive playing with equipment when it should be held, inappropriate language, interrupting, and even lying. For many of us, these may be addressed in the rules that we established. If you do not address them at the beginning of the semester and you allow them to continue in this behavior, many times it's going to escalate and it's going to become a major problem for you in the classroom. And then we look at major problems, then we also look at major escalating problems: roaming at will, leaving the space, constant interference with others, blatant refusal to cooperate. I always like to share the story of my student named Tice. And Tice did all 3 of these. When things did not go his way, he would just walk around. He would try to leave the classroom. If somebody else was having a good time and doing something, he wanted them to be miserable. And so he would do whatever it took to interfere with what they're doing so they would be upset because he was upset. And then if, as a teacher, I would ask him to do something, he many times would refuse to cooperate. So ultimately, as you go through your steps of dealing with behavioral issues, Tice would end up visiting our principal because that was the last straw and that was the last option that I had. And that was a major escalating problem. So we were consistently looking for ways to deal with issues that occurred as it relates to Tice's behavior. So as we maintain a learning environment, there's 3 categories, 3 guidelines that we're going to look at: increasing appropriate behavior, decreasing inappropriate behavior, and dealing with whole class problems. I think the key for this one is increasing the appropriate behavior. We want positive outcomes as it relates to our students. And so when we think about 3 strategies to help us with increasing appropriate behavior, we first think about positive interaction. In your book on page 130, it gives some good examples of how we can interact with our students. You'll notice on this chart that it has 2 categories: verbal positive statements and nonverbal positive statements. These are things that are very easy, they're simple to do, and they don't require a lot of your time. The second one is eliminating differential treatment. One of the things you should do as a teacher is use figure 9.1. You don't have to do this all the time, but occasionally do a chart. Videotape yourself teaching and do a chart of how many times you call a student's name, how many times you reprimand them, and also the positive interaction. Sometimes when we reprimand a student, we don't give a lot of positive interaction to them because we're upset and we're not really giving them a chance. So sometimes it's good for us to actually see the differential treatment that may occur in our own teaching. And then finally, prompting. This again is very easy, and it's also a way of increasing appropriate behavior, but remind the students what is expected of them. Positive prompting, again, is very easy, but many times we don't do it because we become occupied in what we're doing at that particular time. So, techniques for increasing appropriate behavior. One, you want to ignore the inappropriate behavior. What this is going to do is going to help avoid interruptions. This would be in the category of non-problems. Sometimes if we respond to issues that are non-problems, it's just going to take away time from the students who are doing what we consider to be appropriate. You want to become a master at nonverbal teacher interactions. Again, this is something that's not going to take a lot of your time, but it's something that if you do master, you'll see a positive outcome with your students. And then finally, person-to-person dialogue. And this isn't necessarily in the classroom. This is throughout the day, throughout the school year, the interaction that you have with students outside of physical education class. So how do we decrease inappropriate behavior? One of the things I want you to consider as we talk about decreasing inappropriate behaviors is look at some of the examples that are provided to you in your book. If we look at the third one, which is timeouts, there are ways for you to have students involved during timeouts. So for example, if you look on page 134, you'll notice there's an example on page 134 of what the students can fill out while they're in timeout. This is a way for you to let them think about the decisions they made, but also you can increase that positive behavior that we so desire. And if you look at number 6, letters to parents, I can't stress this enough with my students. The communication you have with parents is so important. Take the time to talk to parents about what's going on in the classroom, because as a parent myself, I want to know what my students are doing, how they're behaving. I want to hear about the positive things, but I also want to hear about the things that we can help to improve while they're at home with us. And then finally, as I shared earlier with my interactions with Tice, you only want to involve the principal as a last resort. Do everything in your own power to try to resolve an issue. And then maintaining appropriate behavior in an entire class. One of the things that I did that I felt was very effective, and colleagues of mine have done this as well, and they have found it to be effective, is to have some sort of point system. So for example, when my students would walk into the classroom, they started out with 10 points for behavior and 10 points for shoes. If everybody wore appropriate tennis shoes, then they would maintain 10 points, and those 10 points would be added to their yearly total. Now, as from a behavior standpoint, you don't take away points for one person. You take away points for an entire class. So if an entire class is having difficulty with a certain situation, I may take a point away to kind of get their attention. Because one of the things you'll find out is that classes love it when they can keep all 20 points. Principals will recognize classes that get all 20 points. Their classroom teacher will recognize them for keeping all 20 points. So there's certain rewards for them for maintaining those 20 points. And so again, it kind of helps you establish an accountability system for your students, and it also helps you maintain the appropriate behavior that you desire. And then finally, the last slide, teaching skills that promote a positive learning environment. So these are the things that you want to focus on as it relates to maintaining appropriate behavior. Keep your movement patterns unpredictable. In other words, don't put your feet in concrete. Don't find a place that you like and just stand there. Move around. Scan the class frequently. Keep your eyes moving. Be seen and heard by all children. Don't leave anyone out. Make sure everybody sees and hears you when you are talking. Make sure you're clear. Make sure you're concise. Elementary kids need us to be specific with our directions. Don't ever assume that they understand what you're saying. And then separate organization aspects of directions from content. So in other words, don't mix them together. Again, that goes back to being clear with what it is you want them to do. And then have eyes in the back of your head. I know this sounds funny, but as teachers, we want to have an awareness of everything that's going on around us. If you can accomplish these things, then you're going to have that positive learning environment that we so desire. You're going to help maintain the appropriate behavior that you desire as well. I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you next time.